In some cases, you may want to have dynamic attributes. I'm not talking about directives, but actual HTML attributes with dynamic values. For example, let's say I had a link below the full name that points to Google. Rather than hard-coding the URL into the attribute, let's store it inside the data object. I'm going to call it URL. We want the href attribute to be set to the data property in the view instance. We learned previously that we couldn't use expressions inside an attribute's value. View will not process expressions placed inside attributes. Therefore, we'll need to use a directive. Luckily, you don't have to memorize 20 different directives for every attribute there is. Right before the href attribute, we're going to add a directive called vbind. In between the directive and attribute, we're going to add a colon. The vbind directive will allow an HTML attribute to have a dynamic value. You can apply this to any attribute by adding it before the attribute. The colon will act as a separator between the directive and attribute. By adding the vbind directive to an attribute, View will process the value as an expression. Therefore, we can set this attribute to URL. That's all we need to do. Back in the browser, we can refresh the page and click the link. The link will open in a new tab. The vbind directive allows for any attribute to have a dynamic value. Throughout the course, you'll see how incredibly useful this directive is. You'll get a lot of practice binding attributes. Because it's so common, there's a way to shorten this directive. Back inside the document, we're going to remove the vbind directive, but leave the colon in place. This syntax is a shorthand way of writing the vbind directive. If View finds a colon before the attribute name, it'll assume that you'll want to bind the attribute. Let's test the application. Back in the browser, we'll click the link again. Google will open a new tab once again. As you can see, either method works. Using the longhand or shorthand version is all preference. For the rest of this course, I'll be using the shorthand version.